For over 2 centuries, the United States of America has seen a changing cast of presidents, each facing unique challenges and shaping the course of history. Some have served a single 4-year term, others 2, and a few even defied the norm altogether. So what does it mean to serve 2 full terms as president, and how many US presidents have actually managed this feat so far? Let's take a closer look at the history of 2-term presidencies, the people who achieved it, and the circumstances that shaped their time in office. Before diving into the specifics of who served 2 terms and when, we need to understand how US presidents are elected in the first place. While the concept of electing a president seems familiar and straightforward today, it wasn't always so. What's unique is that the US president is not chosen directly by a popular vote, but rather through a system called the Electoral College. This system involves electors, delegates from each state who cast their vote based on the preferences of their constituents. Over the years, the particulars of this system evolved as the nation grew and became more politically diverse. While the total number of electors has varied over time, today there are 538 electors, with each state allotted a number based on its population. A majority of 270 electoral votes is required to officially elect the president. The first US president to take office under this system was, of course, George Washington. He was elected as the country's first president in 1789. And, following his success the first time around, Washington was re-elected for a second term in 1792. His re-election began the long legacy of presidents who would go on to serve 2 terms. However, Washington's time in office was technically a bit shorter than most of the 2-term presidents who followed him. Since George Washington, a total of 14 US presidents have served 2 full terms in office. This includes some of the more famous figures in history like Thomas Jefferson, Andrew Jackson, and Ronald Reagan. These presidents not only managed to gain the trust of the public, but they also overcame the challenges of leading the country through periods of social, economic, and international change. It's important to note that even among these 14 presidents, not all of them served uninterrupted 8-year terms. Some faced obstacles along the way that altered the course of their presidencies. George Washington, for example, was indeed the first president to serve 2 terms, but his presidency was cut short by delays in the beginning, making his total number of days in office 2,865, slightly fewer days than the 2,922 that most 2-term presidents serve. Nonetheless, Washington's re-election set a precedent for the 2-term tradition, which would influence the future of the office even up to today. While most of the presidents who served 2 terms were able to do so consecutively, Grover Cleveland holds a special distinction. He was the first president to serve 2 non-consecutive terms, making him both the 22nd and the 24th president of the United States. Cleveland's 2 separate terms add an interesting layer to the history of presidential terms, showing that even presidents who weren't necessarily the first choice can find their way back into office after a break. As we move further into history, Franklin D. Roosevelt stands out as the only president who served more than 2 full terms. He was elected for a 3rd and a 4th term, a feat never before accomplished, and one that would not be repeated again after the ratification of the 22nd Amendment in 1951, which legally limits presidents to 2 terms. Not every president who was elected for a 2nd term actually completed it. Many were faced with unforeseen challenges that forced them to step down or leave office early. Take, for example, Harry S. Truman, who ascended to the presidency after Roosevelt's death. Truman wasn't elected at first. He took office due to the sudden loss of his predecessor. He did go on to be elected for a 2nd term, solidifying his place in history. Similarly, Theodore Roosevelt took the presidency after the assassination of William McKinley. Roosevelt was vice president when McKinley was assassinated, and he quickly assumed the role of president. Roosevelt went on to serve a 2nd term after winning his own election. further cementing his legacy. Then there's Lyndon B. Johnson, who also took over following the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. Johnson faced the daunting task of continuing Kennedy's agenda, but he did so successfully, even winning a landslide victory in his own election just a year later. Calvin Coolidge too became president after the sudden death of President Warren G. Harding. He was thrust into office and later won his own term in the next election, just like Truman and Johnson. These presidents didn't always get elected in the usual way, but their leadership proved effective nonetheless. Not every president who managed to secure a second term in office was able to complete it. The presidency, with its immense responsibilities, can sometimes be interrupted by forces beyond a president's control. For some, tragic and unexpected events cut their time in office short, leaving their successors to finish what they started. One of the most infamous examples is Richard Nixon, who was re-elected for a second term in 1972, only to see his presidency unravel under the weight of the Watergate scandal. Nixon's involvement in the break-in at the Democratic National Committee headquarters, followed by a cover-up, led to mounting pressure from the public and from Congress. Faced with the prospect of impeachment, Nixon resigned from the presidency in 1974, making him the only U.S. president to ever step down from office. His resignation left a significant mark on the office, highlighting the power of checks and balances and the fragility of political careers when trust is broken. Other presidents met more tragic ends. Both William McKinley and Abraham Lincoln, revered leaders who each won a second term, were assassinated during their time in office. McKinley was shot by a self-proclaimed anarchist in 1901, while Lincoln was famously assassinated at the Ford Theater in 1865 by John Wilkes Booth, only a few months into his second term. These violent acts sent shockwaves through the nation. The president's untimely deaths left the country in turmoil, with their vice presidents stepping into office during periods of national instability. Lincoln's assassination came at a particularly critical moment in U.S. history, just after the Civil War had ended. It left the newly reunified nation grappling with how to rebuild itself. McKinley's death occurred at a time when the U.S. was rapidly expanding its influence on the world stage, and his successor, Theodore Roosevelt, inherited a country on the brink of transformation. Both presidents, before their untimely deaths, set important precedents, and their second terms were left unfinished, leaving their successors with big shoes to fill at pivotal moments. These instances illustrate the unpredictable nature of the presidency. While the ability to secure a second term is often seen as a symbol of success, it also brings its own set of challenges. Whether through scandal, assassination, or unforeseen crises, presidents who do not finish their second term remind us that even with the public's mandate, the office of the president can be precarious. It underscores how history is shaped not only by the actions of those in power, but also by the events and circumstances that are entirely out of their control. Today, the presidential term limit stands at 2 full terms, a rule solidified by the 22nd Amendment. However, this limit hasn't always been in place, and we've seen a variety of outcomes in those who have served 2 terms. Some presidents, like George Washington and Franklin D. Roosevelt, became symbols of the stability and continuity that 2 terms represent, despite serving for other lengths of time. Meanwhile, others faced immense difficulties that cut their second terms short. Currently, Donald Trump is serving his second term in office, which began in January 2025. Should he complete this term, he will join the group of presidents who have served 2 full terms. This will mark his place as the 15th president to reach that milestone. Interestingly, Trump is also only the 2nd president in U.S. history to be elected to a second non-consecutive term, following in the footsteps of Grover Cleveland. In the end, serving 2 terms is not just about political success. It's about the ability to navigate the changing needs of the nation, to adapt to shifting political and social landscapes, and to retain the trust and support of the American people. Whether it's through navigating national crises or enacting lasting policies, 2-term presidents continue to be pivotal figures in the history of the United States.